right, joining us online is Ron Hanks. Ron Hanks is a 32-year military veteran who served as an enlisted man and commissioned officer. He worked as a linguistic and intelligence officer. Ron has an extensive background in national security issues and has also worked in the energy industry. He is running for the Republican nomination for Congressional District 3 here in Colorado. Ron, thanks so much for being on the program.
Well, good morning to you both. It's a pleasure to be on. It's been a while since I've been on 710, so glad to be here.
Great. Well, glad to have you. All right, we're going to start with the first question. Why are you the best to represent the people of Congressional District 3 to Washington, D.C.?
Well, I'm the most conservative candidate in the race, and I firmly believe CD3 is strongly conservative. I won it when I ran for U.S. Senate. I won that in the primary, and it needs to stay conservative to help President Trump, whom I firmly believe will win this next election. We don't need a sandbagging Congress like Paul Ryan presented to a Mitch McConnell in Trump's first term. So let's keep CD3 conservative. Let's get a conservative Speaker of the House, and let's get an agenda on the table and on the schedule that drains the swamp. And we really don't need an agenda to close the border. Everything is in place for Trump to do that himself, but we will certainly re-up and reinforce the immigration policies and give him a mandate from a conservative Congress to do so.
Yeah, let's talk about immigration. This is one of the biggest issues there. Normally I reserve this for kind of a rapid fire segment, but we were discussing this earlier about deportation and kind of mass deportation. Do you think there's a role with the federal government to dive into and mass deport illegal immigrants?
Well, there has to be, because the federal government, under the corrupt leadership, if you want to call it leadership, of Joe Biden, has let in millions. And again, I'm a military intel guy, and we've been watching the border since 9/11, certainly before that too. But the terrorists that have come across, I mean, it is confirmed, it is dangerous. Joe Biden has set us up for 9/11 events. There is definitely a federal role for deportation, and it has to happen as soon as Trump gets in. I wish it could happen sooner, because I foresee some events, attacks like Hamas conducted against Israel in October of last year.
Now, how do you functionally accomplish a mass deportation? How does that work logistically? It sounds great, but how do you pull it off?
Yeah, and well, first thing you do is you empower the border patrol and the customs folks to start circling and start. They've been basically emasculated, forgive the term, by Biden. So their mandate now is to track them. I suppose U.S. Marshals get in on it. Law enforcement at the local and state levels should start working together again with the federals. That has been a trend of the last many years to decouple law enforcement at the federal, state, local level, and we need to get that back. And Joe Biden has done a great job of shifting these invaders around, and we just heard he flew in 320,000 that we didn't know about. It's going to be an undertaking, but it has to be done, because I think it was a deliberate effort to upend the peace and stability of the nation, and so it has to be priority one.
How is it deliberate? Explain it. Help me understand where you're going with that one, because what would be accomplished to create the chaos and bringing in all the illegals and then everything that happens? How is that a positive? Why is this deliberate? Why do you feel that way?
Well, to me, Joe Biden is not an American president, and what he has done is tantamount to treason. Let's just say it plainly. It is treason. So I do not think he is working for the American people, and I do not think that any of these policies are meant to benefit the American people. It is a deliberate act, and I would say his puppet masters are largely the globalists that would profit by the demise of the American government and economy and culture.
Yeah,
So,
but thankfully treason is defined inside our Constitution, so that's fairly self-evident. But you know,
well, I mean, so what's your point there? I'm not tracking what you're trying to get to me.
that being bad at his job isn't treason and doesn't fall underneath that based on the purview of the Constitution legally.
How about aid and comfort to the enemy?
What enemy, sir? What enemy?
Would you say that people coming across the border that have criminal records, Speaker Mike Johnson himself said in a report, his speech in front of the House there, 617,000 of them have criminal records. These millions that have come across have been paroled into the country without any, with a notice to appear.
If that, to be fair, if that is your baseline, then that means that Biden is treasonous, Trump is treasonous, Obama's treasonous, Bush is treasonous, Clinton's. We can go back because everything that you've described there has happened under every other president. So they're all they're all treasonous, or you're incorrect.
Well, I don't think I'm incorrect, but I'd love to go back because I think the border policy has been a failure for decades. Joe Biden has just masterminded it to he's exponentially improved the disaster that it has been. There should have been a wall on that southern border for years. I went down there after I retired from the Air Force, and at the end of 2017, I went down in 2018 because I felt like both sides of the media stream were lying about it. So I went to El Paso and drove to Yuma on the border road. I mean, there were barbed wire, there was no wire, there were little tank traps that you could drive around with vehicles. Ridiculous. And that could have been fixed years ago. Donald Trump did the best job of it so far. But let me get back to the aid and comfort to the enemy, because you don't apparently seem to agree. But I'll tell you what, when you give a man a cell phone, transportation, and a monthly stipend to come into this country, disappear, and become part of a underground network of terrorists, and I'm talking Hamas, Hezbollah, Al-Qaeda, and frankly, I think PLA, the People's Liberation Army, have special forces here. That's aid and comfort to the enemy. That's treason.
Do you think Joe Biden's going to even say Laken Riley's name tonight at the State of the Union?
I don't know if Joe Biden can say Joe Biden's name at this point. I have little regard for the man. I think he was a installed president, and I think he's an agent of a foreign power. I will watch the State of the Union largely to watch him, and I'll be candid. I'm not sure that is going to be the Democrat ticket. I think Gavin Newsom, and this might make news in Colorado, but I've been saying it, Gavin Newsom and Jared Polis will ultimately be the Democrat ticket. And Joe Biden's going to stumble off. When the Department of Justice put out that report, 350 pages long, and said Joe Biden mishandled classified, but he's too mentally addled to be prosecuted or to pursue this, that's when I think you realize the federal government swamp and deep state is getting ready to swap him out for somebody who can actually put sentences together.
Ron, you served here in Colorado as well. What do Republicans need to be doing to win in the state of Colorado? It's been a rough run the last decade or so.
Well, one thing I think would help would be having closed primaries where only Republicans pick their candidates or vote for their candidates. I'm a big fan of the caucus and assembly process. I believe that brings the candidate selection process down to the grassroots level. And we had an opportunity to get out of these open primaries. And in fact, we voted for it, and it was a 2/3 majority. But the wonderful state of affairs today requires that we get 75%, which is a difficult threshold, usually only seen in dictatorships of Saddam and Hugo Chavez down in Venezuela. So if we had primaries that were only for Republicans to choose, I think we'd get better candidates. We'd get a less wishy-washy type of candidates that ultimately make it through. and principles and the values will hold the day. That'll save the day for the Republican Party and for the candidates. If people know that we actually stand for something and will hold the line against socialism, then they'll join us.
Let's talk a little bit about Jeff Hurd, one of your opponents in the race for Congressional District 3. Why are you better to represent the district than Jeff Hurd?
Well, I haven't seen a lot of Jeff Hurd. I've seen a little bit. We seem to miss the events that the other one's going to. Don't know why that is. He seems like a nice enough guy. I don't think there is a bad endorsement that he won't accept. He's got some real humdingers out there. I'm not driven by endorsements. I think anytime you do that, you're taking time away from talking with people. I think he's a little timid on his positions. I think he's unsure of what needs to be done, and I don't think now today and this era is any time to be breaking a new congressman in and for him to be learning what his base positions are. I know what my positions are. The voters know what my positions are based off of my legislative record and my run for the U.S. Senate.
One of the questions we have here on the text message line is, and this could be wrong, so I want you to address it, because if these are out there, I don't think these rumors should float, but do you live in the district? One person saying
Yes.
You should be running against Pedersen in CD7.
Yeah, I'm over in Mesa County in Grand Junction. I will caucus over there, and but right now I'm over on the east side. This is a massive district, as you know.
Yeah.
27 counties, and it touches two corners, nearly touches the southeast corner as well. So it kind of feels like it's a statewide, the whole state again type of race.
Let's talk a little bit about abortion. This is going to be one of the primary things that Democrats drive in this election. Would you support a federal ban on abortion?
I would give that topic to somebody else to champion and shepherd, but I will support them loyally on what they come up with. My concern is national security. I am a pro-life candidate. I am part of that group that put together the longest floor fight in Colorado history against the Democrats' heinous abortion bill, and that was in 2022. Life is important to me, and I do not like the idea that we put a line on it and say, well, you made the cut, you're 16 weeks evolved, but sorry to all you that are 15 weeks and below. That seems like constitutionally we're not defending our American citizens. But I am a national security type of candidate, where the border is national security, energy is, manufacturing in America is national security, agriculture is national security. I will gladly get involved in any effort somebody wants to shepherd in DC.
Okay, now, Mr. Hanks, I appreciate the answer based on the abortion and letting somebody else take the lead. But they take the lead, and inside, when you're sitting there and you're asked to vote, the issue is on a national abortion ban. Do you feel comfortable telling us how you would vote if that issue is put in front of you while serving?
Yeah, I think I can do that, and here's why. I think we need to severely rethink the abortion issue as a birth control method. I mean, I went through high school in the 80s, and this will come back to it, so give me a moment. The most heroic people I may have ever met in my life were the young girls that got pregnant and carried their babies to term in the 80s. Now, that's pretty tough. I think we have made abortion a quick and easy solution to an inconvenience. Pregnancy is not a life sentence. There is an adoption process out there, and birth control is imminently available. Abortion should not be a birth control method. And so, yeah, I would firmly support. Now, it does depend on what the legislation looks like, so give me some caveat space there, but I would support a national ban on it. And I would also indicate that there is a medical aspect of this where I want the medical professionals to make the final determination.
Now,
I'm a national security guy. I'm not a medical technician.
Now, that's a very fair answer that you gave there, and I'm going to ask this question as a follow-up only because I had asked it on this thread to another candidate, and I'm just trying to be fair and asking the follow-up question because I want to be make sure that I'm playing equal. The follow-up question to your answer is, given that you could be persuaded to vote for a national abortion ban, post Dobbs, the messaging from conservatives was, we finally have given it back to the states. This is what we always wanted. Was that message duplicitous on its face, given we now have a movement towards a national abortion ban? Was that an excuse, or was that the real reason?
I'm not going to characterize any decision as or messaging as, that's somebody else put a lot of work into that. I didn't. What I can tell you is it doesn't seem right to me to be fighting for life, but not all life. So why is it okay that we kill somebody over here and it doesn't even have to, let's just conceptualize it at the broader level.
Yeah.
Why is it okay that somebody dies over in this state but doesn't die in this state? They're all Americans. And when you look at the Constitution, that's one of our jobs, is to protect life and liberty and property and so forth.
That's great. I appreciate it. Again, thank you so much. I know that is not your major issue and we kind of dragged you that direction. I really appreciate the open and honest conversation. So now I want to bring you back into your wheelhouse and talking about national security. Donald Trump has talked about, as far as national security and also for economic protections, he wants to implement a larger tariff. He's talking about tariffs on most imported goods at around 10%. How do you feel about that from a national security and also economic platform? Is this going to help or hurt the average American? Does it keep us safer?
I'm not a fan of tariffs at all. I mean, Donald Trump was a great president, but that doesn't mean I am lockstep with him. I don't think tariffs are where we ought to be focusing. We ought to be focusing on bringing manufacturing back to the country, to the United States, or to Canada and Mexico, at least to this continent. And a quick example on that is the transformers that we use in our electrical grid. We are getting all of them from China right now, and the lag time to get them is years. And it makes us extremely vulnerable. That's where the national security comes in. If we lose our transformers, if they are attacked by the terrorist invaders that Biden has let in to coalesce with those already here, if they take out enough of them, we can be out of, our grid can be down for years. And I mean, that's a zombie apocalypse type of scenario that we need to avoid. We should be making transformers back here in the United States. That's just a single component of the whole thing. But, we're getting 90% of our pharmaceuticals, our antibiotics from China. If we go to war with China, I don't like the idea that either the supply is cut off or the purity of it is not insured. And that's a dangerous place we put ourselves in.
And the raw materials for fentanyl also come out of China as well. That's where you get the base chemicals in order to mix it later on. So your point's well taken.
Yeah, I mean, it's a mess what we've done to ourselves here. I mean, I have no malice to the Chinese people at all, but the Chinese Communist Party is one of the biggest threats. And frankly, I think Joe Biden is beholden to them. And I don't have... we can't get a new administration into office quickly enough. I think we have a lot of dangers facing us between now and Inauguration Day.
We're talking with Ron Hanks. He's running for Congressional District 3, which is the western slope of Colorado, essentially the western half of Colorado. It's a big district. Ron, a lot of the text messages we're getting in here have to do with whether or not you'll support the Republican nominee in this race. In the Senate race, you did not endorse or support Joe O'Dea. You supported the Libertarian candidate. They want to know if you'll support the Republican nominee in this race.
It depends who it is. There are some candidates that are pretty good folks. I'll even call them out. I mean, Russ Andrews and I have developed a decent camaraderie here. He's not as conservative as I am. If he were to get it, I would support him. There are some out there that I don't think are really that well. Let me tell you this. There was a guy in 2020 that fought and put up billboards against Lauren Boebert and said he voted for all Democrats. So I guess that's Joe Biden. And now he's running as a conservative. So, I mean, that's the kind of trash that we learned and experienced in 2022. Some of these folks that petition on are not the conservatives that they purport to be. They kind of avoid the voters, and then they're there, and you find out they're not even Republicans. So it'll depend.
That's interesting. Now, I want to kind of expand the conversation there a little bit and understand the idea of you saying that depends on who this nominee is, whether or not I will go ahead and support them, because I agree with some and disagree with others. Do we see, and are we going to see both in Colorado and nationally, Republicans having to make the same choice about Donald Trump? And the reason I'm asking this is because there's been a concerted effort statewide and also nationwide to eject the people out of the Republican Party if they do not show enough fealty to Trump. Is that a danger? The idea that just the pathway that you said that you're going to take forward for these nominations, is that a danger to try to get this executive office change that you're working so hard for, that people already have rejected Trump and they may do it again for reasons you may not agree with?
Well, I'm not sure I fully track the formation of your point. I would say Donald Trump has overwhelming support, so I don't know where you're coming from on
How
this.
would you define overwhelming? Help me understand what you mean by that word.
Well, okay, let's look at what Nikki Haley got here. Got 30% of the vote in Virginia, but of those in an exit poll, so give a little slack, 92% of those people voting for Haley said that they thought Joe Biden was doing a good job. So what that indicates to me is that we've got a lot of people voting in the Republican Party that simply are not in the Republican primaries, that simply are not Republicans, whether they are unaffiliated crossing over. I mean, in my assessment, Trump is in the high 70s, even the 80%. When you take out the crossover vote that was for Nikki Haley. So we have to, I think, as a party, getting back to your original point or question, I think we have to really focus on what our values are and not be swayed by people that say we have to reach across the aisle. And this is not the time to reach across the aisle. We are compromising our liberties and losing our property rights. And we need to really push back as conservatives, as landowners, as believers.
I can see that. Now, let me stop you there.
Go ahead.
I find your answer very interesting because in some ways I believe that you proved my point about trying to eject people that don't show fealty to Donald Trump out of the party, because the example you gave were the people that voted for Nikki Haley that also said they support Joe Biden. And I think that what I'm hearing is fundamentally, you can't wrap your head around someone that would call themselves a Republican but reject Donald Trump. And that's what I'm worried about, that purity test. And I think, and that's what I'm saying, is that has the Republican Party leaned too hard into this purity test? And is it going to end up being a detriment? Because even if there are people crossing over, you are still showing a significant portion of Republican voters, larger than Democrat voters, choosing an alternate to the guy at the top of the ticket, whether it be Biden or Trump.
Well, if you have an exit poll indicating 92% of the people supporting Nikki Haley think Joe Biden's doing a good job, that indicates to me that there's intrusion into the process, and that Nikki Haley, if it were a closed and solely Republicans voting, would have received a much lower percentage. It's not a matter of a litmus test. It's a matter of people that aren't truly Republicans voting in our race.
I understand where you're coming to that conclusion, but though there were thousands, tens of thousands of Republicans during the 2020 election that saw Donald Trump's name at the top of the ticket and did not vote for him. It didn't mean they weren't Republicans. They just didn't choose him. So even if there would be that choice that a hardcore Republican could look at, just like a friend of the show, Dick Wadhams, said he can't vote for Donald Trump. He's a hardcore Republican. No one can deny. You can disagree on if you want him in the party or not, but you can't deny his resume. And he's going to vote for someone else. It doesn't mean he's not a Republican. So I worry about that filter. I think that the GOP is setting themselves up for failure when you say, well, obviously these people aren't choosing the guy that we like, so they can't be part of the party. And you need them to win. I think it's asking for a losing recipe.
Well, I don't think that's what we're going to see in 2024. I think Donald Trump is going to win this overwhelmingly. And I think there are Democrats and unaffiliated that will be voting for him as well, because he had a stellar first term, especially given the obstacles put up against him. And Joe Biden is so demonstrably bad. So I would say, this election is pretty much election anomalies and fraud aside, the same stuff that we saw in 2020. Donald Trump can beat Joe Biden just on the record. Just there will be enough Democrats and unaffiliated to say we can't afford 4 more years of Joe Biden and Kamala Harris.
Okay, now I understand. I wasn't going to walk in this direction until you open the door, but you mentioned the fraud. Are you still of the belief that the 2020 election was fraudulent and that Joe Biden didn't actually win the election?
I say it every time I'm asked. Okay. Joe Biden was a fraudulently installed agent of a foreign power.
Based on what?
Well, I mean, if you don't know, it's remarkable. But based off of the Wisconsin, the Maricopa audits showed, and I went there twice, by the way. Second time brought people from Colorado to help them work it. We saw down there mail-in ballots that were never folded. We saw ballots that had, and this is firsthand now, this is not just the algorithmic stuff, but we saw ballots down there that had the same little hooks and flags and loops on them. They were copies of copies of copies.
None of fairly enough, sir, none of that has been proven. But again, I don't want to adjudicate and go. It's not going to do us any good. It's not going to do the listener any good, because Jeff and I'll end up boxing shadows about what is and is not proof of the election. So this is how I want to have you answer this question. Recently, Fox News paid $780 million to Dominion. Why did they not instead walk into the courtroom and present all the evidence that you say is right there in front of us? Why did they choose instead to write the big check if the fraud is so evident and so provable?
Talk to their legal team.
No, that's not acceptable. I'm sorry, in this conversation,
no,
that is
it is
that's not acceptable.
It absolutely it is.
How
am I supposed to know what Fox News is doing and the Murdoch kids deciding
that here's the reason.
Money.
Here's why it's a fair question. Here's why it's a fair question. Because in defamation law, truth is an absolute defense. If and only if all the proof that you say exists actually is there, Fox News walks into the courtroom, the Dominion lawsuit evaporates, and Fox News walks out and shows, 1, they have proven the election fraud exists. 2, they become the largest and most reputable news source on the planet. They supplant ABC, NBC, CNN, everybody else, because they're the ones that proved the fraud that they claimed existed. And they do not write a $780 million check if they can write nothing. So I don't know is not acceptable. There is an obvious choice. You walk in, you pay nothing and prove it, or you write the check.
I don't know. I said talk to their legal team. I think
you're avoiding the question.
Strategy.
You're saying
I'm
that
not avoiding your question.
Yes, you are. You said
what I am
the
saying, as you interrupt me, what I was saying is the American people already know this. The majority of Americans believe the fraud in 2020 affected
that is
the presidential
not true.
election.
That's
look
not
that
true.
Up on that up on Rasmussen.
I have. It's not true. That's not true.
Well,
that's not factual. And I understand you not wanting to deal with the Fox News
your
thing.
Education here. Mm-hmm.
You know, I appreciate that, but guess what? I never insulted you personally. And the one thing I've shown is that we have court cases, audits. Every single one of them has never proved any fraud. Nobody's walked in and showed any fraud. That's why it's significant in the Fox case. And you don't have it either. Because if you could have walked over to Fox and saved him hundreds of millions of dollars. You didn't.
Well, that's ridiculous. I mean,
That's okay.
And-
Go talk to them right now. They're talking to Smartmatic. You got the proof? Show up. See how much they're going to pay you. But I appreciate the conversation.
All right. Ron Hanks is running for Congressional District 3. His website is hanksforcolorado.com. hanksforcolorado.com. A lot of positive text messages as well. We'll get to your calls. Ron, thanks so much for being on the program.
Thanks a lot.
Yeah, sure. I think you're wrong on election integrity there, Bill, but it was good talking about it. Let's do it again.
Hey, I appreciate it. Anytime you want to answer the Fox question, you're welcome back. And you're welcome back anytime to talk other things too. The door's always open.
hanksforcolorado.com. hanksforcolorado.com. You can learn more about him and his campaign there.
Jeff and Bill, weekday mornings from 6 to 10 on News Talk 710 KNUS.